And the writer, Mr. Handler, who's describing this, said that Killens, it was not clear concerning Killens' remarks to his audience that he was breaking with it was clear rather to his audience that he was breaking with the doctrine of the Reverend Martin Luther King's philosophy that as Christians, Negroes should love their fellow man in a truly religious sense. Now, James Baldwin, speaking on that same platform, said, and I was present during this entire affair, asserted that the American people shared a collective guilt for the persecution of Negroes, much as Germans did because of their silence during the Nazi persecution. He denounced President Kennedy for what he termed Kennedy's lack of passion in the civil rights struggle. Mr. Baldwin said that there could no longer be a Republican Party for the Negro people as long as it had listed a Barry Goldwater, nor a Democratic Party for the Negro people with a Senator Eastland on its roster. He asserted that the federal government acted swiftly and energetically, that unless the federal government acted swiftly and energetically, future slaughter would make Birmingham look like a dress rehearsal. And now, what do I think about King's attitude? King's right-hand man, Wyatt Walker, at King's convention, according to the New York Times on September the 26th, said, we have, quote, we have been duped, meaning these persons involved in the civil rights struggle, of which King is the symbolic leader. His right-hand man says, and I quote, we have been duped, or have duped ourselves, into believing that the chains have been broken, when in truth we have only been chained more securely. Half freedom has in many instances been worse than no freedom at all. Why, don't ask me what I think about their struggle. I can tell you what they think about their struggle. And they are pointing out that it is becoming more difficult every day for the civil rights leaders to keep the masses of black people nonviolent and long-suffering and patient and keep them from becoming disenchanted. I hope that answers your question.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like.
Hey, what do you guys think about this Jared? He's right?
No, he's pretty sharp.
Yeah, he did that no one else in the house can do.
Yeah, but he's a know-it-all. I mean, I don't think there's room in here for him.
And there will be after Richard gets rid of Big Head. He's a lightweight at everything. Brings nothing to the table.
But he's a great guy.
Great guy, but useless.
Yeah, he is a great guy. Not like that Jared. At least we can all agree on that.
It's wrong, bro.
I gotta talk to the people, son.
You are here on I Mix What I Like. You may check us out on imixwhatilike.org, where you can see all these other shows and what my daddy likes and other cool things.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. Hey, greetings, everybody. Welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like Live, right here on Black Power Media. Again, I'm Jared Ball, very happy to be your host, and back at it once again. Hope all of you are well. Thought I would, again, attempt to revisit some old radio days with the intro. Hear My Baby Girl from back when was nice. Of course, we used to always start off with Malcolm's voice, and would hear also Kathleen Cleaver, Barbara Sizemore, Marimba Ani, John Henrik Clark, Kwame Ture. It was a fire intro. I think I'm forgetting some other voices, but that were mixed in there. Anyway, And we're going to talk a little bit about Malcolm this morning, a little bit about Dr. King as well, in particular, how they were juxtaposed and are being juxtaposed still in media in the context of this new and yet not documentary from ABC and Disney, and have a little fun discussion with that. And then we should have some time, if you all are up for it, to get into some sort of Q&A and some discussion about about several other things. Before we do go any farther, I do need to just take a quick moment and just a quick solemn note. Got some very bad news yesterday that dear brother Asafo, part of the Barter and Build collaborative podcast with the good brother Geechee Motivator, was killed in a bike riding accident, hit by a car apparently. And so it's very sad news. So big rest in power to him and his, much love to his friends and family, to Geechee, solidarity and support to you as well. We wish you all the best and as speedy a recovery as there is possible, but that was just terrible news. So I never know what to say in these moments, so just take a quick minute and think about not only him and his family, but send some love to somebody today that you just never know. So but I really appreciated his work and his support and the effort that he and brother Geechee have been up to, and look forward to whatever comes next in whatever form. So anyway, rest in power to him. Much love to his family. It's just terrible news. I do want to quickly remind folks that, as is put in the show notes, we do have a new Discord link. I really don't know exactly how to use that yet, but I think it's been set up. I think I got that done right, and it's set up. So please do endeavor to make use of that. Big shout out to our patrons and members. So please continue to show support. And if others can join, please do. Of course, support by liking, sharing, subscribing as well. Some new content I hope to be myself creating for patrons and members should be coming, hopefully sooner than later. And I know collectively the platform is developing some things as well. Yeah, the more support, obviously, the more we can continue to try to do. I put a note here, watching that Cosby series and reflecting since then, there are many different tributaries. And one of them, obviously there's no real comparison, but I honestly couldn't help but, at moments try to think about what these women who were drugged and raped were like, how all of that would have happened, and how, what that could have been like to suffer something like that. And I thought about, I mean, there's, I've had my historical, experiences with this or that substance, blackouts, brownouts, or whatever they call it. One or two of those even here or there over the years, particularly back in those 20s, the early 20s in particular. But I did have there was this one incident that the closest that I came, and that I was also reminded of in this recent debate with the gentleman of crypto, because one of the brothers was in the Navy. Please go check out that debate, put it up on our site, on our channel as well. Look, I'm interested in what you all think in the commentary. Please keep that coming, by the way. Most of it was, obviously there's biases, but most of what I've seen posted on our channel has been positive or constructive criticism. There was one comment that just basically said that it's a similar kind of thing, and this is one of the struggles where one of the point more or less was that I got washed, and that I just don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't understand the technology and that kind of thing. There's not what I would still be looking for are the specifics, and what I do appreciate about that debate is that there were at least specific criticisms. The one thing I had hoped that they might have done is go through the video I did criticizing Bitcoin in Black America, Brother Jackson's book. And I would have preferred that they go through and say what was wrong in my criticism. Some of that was done indirectly, but that would I thought would have been the most constructive, since they would have had that document. Like I was working from a document, and they would have had that as a document. That I thought could have been a little bit, maybe would have elevated the discussion a little bit more if we had just started from that. And maybe it could happen with them or others going forward. Like, let's start with what has already been established and go from there. Like, build these as different sort of texts, so to speak, from which to build a critique or an analysis or a response. But at the same time, some of it was there are just cavernous differences in how we understand history, economics, race, etc. And at some point, and even Jackson towards the end, and I agreed with him in this point that we're just going back and it's where I feel most reminded, and this is no disrespect intended, where I'm as an atheist debating those of faith. Like at a certain point, that's it. I mean, you could have fun, challenging discussions about a lot of different things, but at a certain point, it just becomes we're just not. It's just we can't get anywhere. So, but the other brother, being from King Bless, I believe is his name, said he was in the Navy at one point, and it reminded me that. I don't know if I've shared this one. I don't, again, autobiographical is not my thing publicly at this level, but but in the Navy, there was this thing we used to do called Fleet Week, where, because I was on the USS John F. Kennedy, which was the sort of flagship aircraft carrier at the time, late 80s, early 90s. And they would and Fleet Week is where you go up and down, for us, the East Coast of the United States, from Florida to Massachusetts, with stops along the way, showing off the ship, and people come on board and celebrities come on board. And then you go off board and into town, and you're supposed to wear your uniform, because you're supposed to be showing off the Navy. And the coolest of the cool slipped off with civilian clothes and would change in the street somewhere, or somebody that they knew in town. Others would want to be in uniform, and which could lead to positive and negative experiences. And this is the point I'm getting to, I think I had some of the both. So the positive, because I wasn't the coolest of the cool, so I would rarely change. I would just be in uniform. And at the time, I'm not going to front, what I mean? It was, it wasn't that bad a thing to do for me. But so there were like invitations into bars, invitations all over the place, particularly in New York or even certain parts of Boston. The opposite also occurred in Boston. Like, Boston is Mississippi, the North is it's been described. But the flip side is that, some of the worst was that people would actually get robbed and dumped, intoxicated and beaten and pockets empty on the pier, that kind of thing. The worst thing that, though, again, longer story longer, was that I thought of this one time during Fleet Week where we went on to the Intrepid, which was a museum downtown at the harbor, and they had a DJ. It was, party up on the thing. Met some young women from Brooklyn, should have known, and they invite us. And this is sort of where things get murky. The memory, a lot of, honestly, a lot of drinking. And we go back to this place, And all I remember is being handed a cup with liquor, I assumed, in it. And then I don't remember, then everything is blank. And then I remember being awakened by, and not in a romantic way, hands like almost like patting me down, pants not on, again, but not feeling like a romantic thing was happening. And then I kind of woke up, and there's this one of these young women. I don't know exactly what she was doing. It was not sexual though. I thought I was getting robbed or something was going on. So we ended, and sure enough, my money was gone. We, you know, and so I think that's what ended up happening. Like it was like, and none of us really wanted to talk about what happened. Like we didn't really remember. There was nobody could really compare stories. The handful of us that were still there from the Navy and on the way back to the ship. But I do remember, and I think one of the reasons that none of us wanted to talk was that there was this sense of vulnerability of and shame. Like again, I don't think anything, like I certainly didn't like those women were saying that they woke up and some of them were saying they knew they had been violated sexually. There was nothing like that. But it was that sense of vulnerability, sense of being shamed, sense of being hustled. So, and then not being clear, just not knowing exactly, and not being able, and knowing like if we had even wanted to, which nobody was going to report anything, but had we couldn't even compare notes, is my point. Like nobody had enough of a memory once we left, or at least once we showed up. Although I don't remember how we got there. I mean, it's many years. My memory's bad anyway. But that night, it was always, so nobody had any. Anyway, so I did think about that and just thought again, you know, just how dangerous it can be. And this is, you know, this was like a handful of young men, you know, at the prime of our youth, physical strength and all of that kind of stuff. And I mean, it was, you know, they got us back there. Pockets were empty. So something, you know, on there, you know. but anyway, so when I think about, I just started to, like, man, like, anyway, it's kind of been just messing with me these last, having watched that Cosby thing. So I just thought I would just quickly share that and just like, so for women to be isolated, and we were in a group, but for women, particularly, you know, if they are to be isolated, to be preyed upon like that in that particular way, and to have not any real clarity about what happened going forward to report or anything. I mean, it's just bananas. So it's just horrible. And you know, anyway. In another way, another sort of form of intellectual or let me just stop. That was about to be probably an inappropriate segue or joke. But so the other day, this was just so well timed.
Hey,
The
good morning
other
to you,
day,
Andrew. Black Spending Power Reach
in teaching one of my classes, and see if I can get this set up right. Yeah, I mean, except it wasn't like a date, you know, like it was like, I mean, it was just, you know, we were just young and we thought at the time, you know, young ladies want to take us back and we're going to have fun for the night. But yeah, that's what I think. I sympathize you, but I am happy people out there robbing me. Just in case anybody's hearing this in the audio podcast, I'm laughing because Emma, aka Vol, and I see you in the Discord too. I appreciate you. Doc Jab, I do like you, and I know you went into military to avoid jail. I sympathize with you, but I'm happy that people out there robbing military people. I hear you. So on the one hand, I get it because I mean, we on some level we knew, like that's why like some of the like the cooler folks knew to change it to civilian clothes. And in some cases, they became the predators of other military personnel once they had put on their civies. But yeah, there's a lot there. So I get it on the one hand. So we knew, like you're showing up in town. Everybody knows you're young, dumb, and you know what they say you were full of as a young man. You got your pockets full. You know, yeah. So I mean, we were prime targets, and of course you're being dropped into major cities where, of course, all the inequalities are there. And if somebody's out there hustling, and if they could go to the pier and have a couple drinks with the fellas, drop something in the drink, and get some money, you know. And the reason I know something like that, where I'm always suspicious, is because I had, you know, especially back then, it was a lot of drinking. And the idea that the thought that I would have gone from party to total unconsciousness. Yeah, anyway, I just can't imagine that would have. So yeah. So I get it. I hear you. I get it. There's a lot out here. Anyway, so I'm leaving class the other day, and on the way out, one of my students says that they want to ask me a question separate from the discussion of what we were doing in class. And it was about the fact that they had watched a video of a presentation I had given on buying power. And they wanted to make it clear to me that they knew better than I, and in fact, what she said was, I think the myth you describe is a myth. And her point, and then she said, because nobody out here ever talks about that. Nobody discusses it. Nobody thinks that we have all this money. I don't know what you're talking about. So I just said, well, you know, in part the work was me responding to so I just said, I did encourage that she consider, you know, a little humility and investigate and consider a little bit more. And then that night I go home and somebody tags me in this video. It was perfectly timed. And I said, this is fascinating. So let me just pull this up here.
Reached a record $1.6 trillion in 2021. The ability to buy, save, and invest more than doubling since 2000. That growth exceeding the full U.S. economy, but actually lagging other ethnic groups, Latinos with a 288% increase, Asians with a 388% increase in spending power. However, other groups have also seen an increase in their net worth. Black Americans instead have seen their wealth actually fall by 14%. And with the S&P gaining 27% last year, the value of U.S. homes increasing by 31% last year. Many black leaders are asking the black community to really rethink how it's spent.
This is disturbing on so many different levels. What else can we say? Save your money by assets, not liabilities. Invest your money in real estate.
Because that's that. So what I thought, of course, his response, by the way, so the news story was Black America's reported to have $1.6 trillion in spending power, but its collective wealth has gone down, whereas other communities' wealth has gone up, and he charts their buying power as well. Because as I say, every segment of society has its buying power assessed. Governments, municipalities, every community, segment of the community, but only when it's really only, and more so with Latin America, but primarily historically, when it's brought up for Black people, it has a specific argument, which is similar here, which is that the criticism then turns to how Black people spend. Again, part of my argument about the myth is that it blames poor people for their poverty. and then we get that same kind of advice: stop being financially illiterate, buy land, buy assets, crypto, buy whatever, and you'll do better. And so anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on it this morning. I just thought it was funny, the timing of it, because I go home and that's in my inbox. And I'm sitting there saying, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So if as I humbly was, but there's always one, and I was kind of like that student. I'd like to think I was a little bit more informed, a little older, a little bit more whatever, but probably not. And in some ways I was just that arrogant with certain faculty that I knew I disagreed with, so I have to, every semester there's usually at least one in per class that is like, I don't agree with you. Several, not everybody agrees, but those, of those who don't agree, there's usually just one, maybe two who are like, I don't agree with you, and I'm going to tell you I don't agree, and we're going to have a semester long exchange. So it's cool. It's all good. But I did that anyway. The timing of that I thought was hilarious. It was hilarious. All right, a couple other things before we get into the sort of the main course for the day. Oh, I was told there's an echo in the video. You know what? I know why the echo is there. I know exactly what it is. I know what's happening and what I need to do about that. Sorry about that, everybody. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to have to, as Michael Jackson used to sing, make that change real quick. Let me make a logistical thing here, which I think will take care of the issue going forward, because we do need to look at a couple of other clips. So I want to make sure. So thanks to the ear doctor for that text, and shout out, teamwork makes the dream work. Oh, my bad, Ricky. I didn't mean to leave your comment up there like that. But that video, yeah. And shout out to you, John Blaze, for not being able to talk at work. Have you seen the new Black Focus News album? No, I haven't. If somebody could send me a link or I'll look it up, please. I haven't seen it. That's interesting. Wait, what? Maybe I missed something. I don't know if this was directed at me. No, I don't. No, to me, rape is anywhere where someone cannot say no. To me, that's rape, just as a general starting point. If the person cannot say no and you proceed, then I do think it's rape. So that's even like my Sally Hemings argument. Even if she supposedly with that mythology fell in love with Thomas Jefferson or whatever that nonsense, it doesn't matter. She couldn't say no. So I don't care if she, it's still to me rape. But I might have missed something. So I'm sorry if I'm missing the context to that. Okay, so one other thing that I wanted to get to before we get to one of the main issues, or the main issue of the day, is, let's see, because we got to keep up with the good Martins at Wall Street on Parade. Let's see if I can. And just a little look at this story here. Facebook's fall of 26.39% yesterday delivered billions in losses to 401ks and public pensions. So this is why I know others have been making this argument, and I agree. This is where a tendency towards socialism would be good. These companies need to be nationalized and regulated, and their wealth redistributed. From 401k plans to mutual funds to the federal government workers' pension plan to foreign central bank stock portfolios, everyone is feeling Facebook's pain today. The parent company's stock, Meta Platforms Inc., lost 26.39% of its value yesterday in one trading session. That's what happens when the Fed is allowed, with no restraints from Congress, to fuel a bubble market that allows one company that pays no dividend and has barriers for upstarts and has no barriers for upstarts like TikTok to steal its user base to gain a market cap of over $1 trillion. On June 28 of last year, Facebook's stock closed above $1 trillion market cap for the first time. It has been on a price decline since last September. And when the stock market's closing bell rang yesterday, it was a $647 billion stock. Its market cap decline yesterday was the largest decline for any one stock in one day in the history of the stock market. The pain is going to be widely felt. According to Yahoo Finance, large mutual fund and ETF families are the largest owners of Facebook shares, with Vanguard Group holding $62 billion of September 29th, as of September 29th, 2021. We're going to come back to this in later this morning. This is actually very much of a foreshadowing. The next top three holders of the same date were BlackRock with $52.9 billion, FMR, parent of Fidelity, with $43.2 billion, and T. Rowe Price with $32.9 billion. The funds may have lightened their positions since their last reporting date. So anyway, as of December 31st, 2020, total stock market value represented two times the US GDP. So this is where all the speculation and bubble making is going. Siblis research further shows that as of March 31st of this year, the total stock market value in the U.S. stands a breathtaking $49.1 trillion. That includes U.S.-based public companies like the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ market, OTCQX U.S. market as well. 49 trillion is twice the US GDP, right? So that's why two times the US GDP. That's not, doesn't seem sound. A $49.1 trillion stock market is larger than the combined GDP of the four largest industrial nations, US, China, Japan, and Germany, according to the International Monetary Fund data. The absurdity of the valuations in the US market are captured in this statistic. Just 5 companies, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google's parent, Alphabet, and Facebook, account for a total of 7.85 trillion of the 49.1 trillion stock market value. That's 5 companies out of thousands, and yet they represent 16% of the total stock market value. And here's another deeply troubling thought. Each of those 5 stocks are being traded in Wall Street's bank's secretive dark pools, end quote. So we've talked a little bit about that, here, just covering that is the Martin's work. The, dark pools, just, you don't know who the investors are, and you don't know where the money is going. So, by the way, of the few things that I would have liked to have done better or had more time with in the debate Friday is around that sort of point. I kind of made the point, but this is what I'm saying is happening again in the crypto space, that we don't want a situation where dark pools, I mean, again, that already exists as a problem. That is the anonymous, largely uncheckable pooling of wealth for investment in a stock market, meaning that you can't necessarily identify who's making what decision, where the wealth is going, what influence is being wielded as a result of that. And I don't like, as a goal for a society, that's not what I want. So when it's being pitched over and over again that the crypto space offers this kind of anonymity and we want that kind of, secrecy, and that's not what I want. And for those who've been critical of all my discussion of crypto lately, I'm not doing too much today. Not much at all. Although there was one story that came out last week that I had meant to bring up on the remix, and that we just didn't have time to get to. That I think is interesting, that again relates to one of the points I would have liked to have more time to discuss in that debate, which is one of the reasons why so much energy is being why there's so much energy in promoting, particularly to Black audiences, investment, and that, you know, with the, and in general, just with the Matt Damon, you know, commercial and all that other kind of stuff. Let me expand this just a little bit here. Let's see. So .com Super Bowl commercials are a warning to crypto brands. I thought this was interesting because this comes out in an advertising age. Of course, and the short of it is that with the coming Super Bowl, which is notorious for being a big time for marketers, the story is noting that there has been a shift in the last few years where now, unlike before, in previous years, going from the .com bowl, that was, when all the .coms and the booming in the initial internet bubble boom were promoting their work. Was this the initial one? Maybe it was the second one, because I think there was an early one that I thought it started in the 90s, but this is probably the same one. Before the .com bubble burst initially. Let's see. Why would there be? Okay. Anyway, remember the .com bowl, the year was 2000, and for a number of web-related startups hoping to lead the adoption of the internet, the Super Bowl posed the perfect advertising opportunity, or so they thought. These companies spent an average of $2.1 million for 30-second spots, only for the most to fade away soon after, either through acquisitions by bigger internet startups or dissolutions over faulty business models. Now, 22 years later, the Super Bowl is seeing an influx of a different breed of tech hopefuls, crypto brands aiming to capitalize on a white-hot marketplace and educate consumers. FTX, a crypto exchange, has previously advertised with Tom Brady and Gisele Bündchen, will air its first big game commercial this year, and rival exchange Crypto.com is expected to run multiple national spots of its own. A 30-second spot this year is worth an estimated $6.5 million. It feels like this year is resembling a lot of the .com era, said Nick Miaritis, executive VP at Vayner Media. This will be the Super Bowl with new types of companies, products, and services, with an especially big push in the crypto world. Then it recounts some of the failures. Anyway, that was essentially what that was really only my point in bringing it up. That I think it's interesting that the advertising world is saying that from their point of view, things look similar to the previous .com world, where there's this big push to promote this new tech and new mechanism for communicating and advertising as solving all the world's problems. And yet, as we've seen, many of those companies fell apart, and the internet has fallen along the same, for some of us, predictable lines of capital, colonial, imperial, conquest, etc. Consolidation, accumulation of wealth have all increased, so on and so on and so on. So when the gentlemen of crypto or others say things like, I've heard many times, and I think they started to in our debate, but I don't think the point really got to take off, pun intended, was that we are today in 2022, relative to crypto, we are in the early 90s. We are today relative to crypto what the early 90s were to the internet. In other words, and if you invest and get into it now, you'll see that it becomes the dominant thing, and it changes the world. But in many ways it doesn't. In terms of social relations, power relations, it does not change anything. The internet, as we are seeing in the crypto space, follow the same lines of capitalist imperialist logic. Propagate message, expand the reach of advertisers and psychological warfare, consolidation of wealth, so on and so on and so on and so on. So I just think it's interesting that we're seeing that same thing happening now, yet the supporters of crypto are saying, no, all of this is the sign of the coming shift in dominance and power, and proof of the accuracy of their claims. And I'm saying, no, this is exactly what has always happened. It's happening yet again. All right. So one other thing, there's just one more thing from that I wanted to get, that I would have liked to, from that, get in more, that I would have, from that debate that I would have liked to get more into, and will want to get in more into, is the claim during the debate that had Black people gotten into crypto as early enough, as did Bitcoin Zay, Brother Jackson, that we would be in this. And he made the claim, I thought he said in the debate something like 300,000 times more, or something, something enormous like that, in terms of what the value was at the beginning, where it is now. So I just looked this up very quickly the other day, and it's, again, it's something I want to come back to beyond this morning, is Bitcoin price at 2009 started at 0, and the tracking of this summary history basically suggests that nobody was really paying it any attention then. It couldn't really be expected. Nobody really knew what was going to happen, so that's why the price was so low. Then there was this jump around 2001, what they call the surge part 1, where in 2009 Bitcoin was barely above 0. Real adoption of Bitcoin began to take place about 2 years later, and major Bitcoin price surge happened for the first time. So in February 2011, Bitcoin reached $1. So, like Bitcoin Zay said in our debate, you could have jumped in at $1, $10, even $100, and you by now would have made a lot of money. But this is always, the amount of people that would have even known about this or been expected to take that chance back then would have been obviously really low, which is the point, which is why the price was about at $1. And the idea that in 2011 you could expect it to be worth in the what is it, $35, $37, $39, $40,000 now, I don't think is fair. But the real point I wanted to get to is that by the end of 2011, Bitcoin was it jumped up to $30 at one point, so 100 times its initial starting price of about 30 cents. By year's end, it was down to about $5. And then 2013 is where things really kicked off, and this is really the point I wanted to get at. So if you, it is true that if you got in 2013, you would have seen gains, as it says here, of 6,600%, which is a lot, obviously. But it goes back to the initial point that I think I tried to make during the debate, or that I would have wanted to make it, is that you either have to know about this and have any awareness of it to begin with, to begin with, or you would have to have a lot of money to turn that 6,600% increase into a lot of money. So if you're investing $1 or even $10, or even $100, not many people would have that foresight, or even in many cases even the ability. But then you would have had to hold on to, let that sit and go up and down and up and down and up and down for now 10 years. Anyway, but the price consolidated for about 6 months until another historic rally in November and December of that year, that is 2013, when the price peaked at $1,100. So already at $1,100 by the end of 2013, $1,100, when recent reports have shown that most people, white or Black or anything, don't have even $500 or $600 in their savings account. most people wouldn't have had $1,100. So yes, if you, in some fantasy way, if all Black people had pooled whatever money was available and invested in early 2013, there could have been a windfall. Would that windfall have been enough to overturn inequality collectively? Would that windfall have been anything permanent other than just that, a windfall that gets redistributed back to an unequal and extractive economy? I don't know, but it just seems, just again, from being, but if we were that collectively well organized to do something collectively, why not just assume political power and again make all of this moot? Because that would ultimately be my point. The point is, we could start with, at least, I don't care where in the economy money gets made and wealth gets created, because with political power, we assure that it gets redistributed. So you want to create crypto and do all this, great. If wealth gets created, it's getting redistributed one way or another. That's ultimately, so but I want to continue to look into that and see what's what. I guess I'll do this later. I think I was thinking of even maybe doing this as like a Patreon thing, an actual response to Richard Wolff, because Richard Wolff, so I invited Richard Wolff to come on here to talk about crypto. I was told no. Then on the channel, Democracy at Work, to which I subscribe and encourage you all to do, I saw that they dropped the headline said something about all things crypto. So I was like, wow. So I said, fine, if you don't going to come on with me, but you at least talk about it, then I'll get what I need from that. But it wasn't him. It was a discussion on another podcast that they posted on that one with the blockchain socialist, the more or less anonymous dude who I think he said he's in Portugal, somewhere in Europe. And one of the reasons why we couldn't arrange for him to come here is because of the time zone thing. But I listened to that whole thing, and maybe I'll say, and I think I'll maybe package that for a members only response. Anyway, let's get to the matter at hand. Let's get to the most important, what folks are trying to do to Malcolm X and Black radical politics, and how, subtitled, an abuse of Black history. In Black History Month. All right, back in a quick second. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. All right, everybody. Again, thanks to everybody for joining us here live. Those who hear this later or check this out on all your favorite audio podcasts, welcome and greetings to you as well. Please do like, share, join, subscribe, become a member, sign up for Patreon, all that good stuff. And stick around for in about 10 days during the 1-year anniversary of BPM. We're going to be making some project announcements, etc., and so forth. And all your support is appreciated. Please also continue to support and participate in my HBCUs, Not a Different World project. All the information can be found at imixwhatilike.org. But I'm still collecting stories, a lot of it's fascinating. So please continue to support that project by sharing your HBCU stories. Again, imixwhatilike.org, and all the information is there for that as well. So the other day, and I really appreciate what, having this platform, actually using this platform in this way, because the other day, I had agreed, some time ago, I had agreed to work on one of the convocations at Morgan State. And we pulled it off. I think it went very well. A discussion of Pan-Africanism with some of my faculty colleagues for a Trans-Africa convocation. And as often happens, the good people on the convocations committee, shout out to Dr. Johnson, through interesting forms of communication and encouragement and voluntelling, I ended up agreeing to support and produce something for the coming Malcolm X, Dr. King convocation. I didn't initially understand that this was to be my, method of participation. And there was even some discussion actually of changing the name of the convocation to add, or at least to add women's names to that convocation. And that process is anyway, so that's a process in and of itself. So that has nothing to do with me. But but in that, I said, okay, so I don't have a lot of time to put this together. So I said, well, let's kill birds with stones or plant trees with seeds. And then fortunately, our media and state and power apparatus provided us with this perfect opportunity, because in the discussion within the convocation committee around the Malcolm X Dr. King convocation, someone raised the question of relevance. In other words, is a discussion of Dr. King and Malcolm X in 2022 still that relevant? So my initial response, and this was even before this latest piece drop, was, of course, I'm biased, but of course I said, well, absolutely, it's still relevant given all of, if for no other reason, all of the attention paid and encouraged and the rebranding involved by the powers that be, that we from time to time be reminded of our great leaders. Of course, be reminded in a way that those in power would prefer we be reminded. But that is, so I said, we've had all these Netflix documentaries about Malcolm X. We had the Hulu series about Dr. King and the FBI come out. We've had movies, whether it's Selma or what was the One Night in Miami, all of these pop cultural references, and we as educators needing, of course, to make more meaning of it than they do for our students, if for no other reason, then of course it's still relevant. Of course, I think they're still relevant beyond all of that because, and this is ultimately always my point, the ideas that they worked with, that is Malcolm and Dr. King, even more importantly than them as individuals, even more importantly than even the specifics of the civil or human rights struggle or the Black liberation struggle here, these ideas of anti-imperialism, anti-capitalism, socialism, Pan-Africanism, nationalism, revolutionary, nationalism, guerrilla warfare, you name it, whatever they were all working with, of course, these ideas are still relevant. In particular, because the conditions that brought and make those ideas relevant are still at play, and in most cases worse now. So of course they're still relevant. So when thinking about Dr. King and Malcolm X, they do provide in many ways perfect exemplars. They are perfect exemplars of various efforts to apply, to interpret, involve, and engage various radical ideas, make them relevant for their time, and to impact their communities and movements in ways that continue to need to be rebranded, restructured, with energies redirected in other ways. So each of them, that is Malcolm and Martin, were seen as threats by the state, by conservative racists, by the Black bourgeoisie, and white liberals alike. Particularly by the end of both of their lives, both of them were equally, in many ways, seen as threats by that compendium of segments of the society. Their media representation reflects how they were and are still being used to redirect righteous anger and radicalism into safe and convenient tributaries, often managed in corporate and nonprofit liberal structures. It is also interesting to note that both in terms of Morgan State University, it is good to be reminded of the fact that both Malcolm and Martin visited Morgan State University. Dr. King, June 2nd, 1958. And Malcolm himself had been there during the August Meyer debate. And you know what? Where did I put that? Those specifics. Hold on one second. Malcolm X. Hey, I should have had that. I thought I had that right there. August Meyer debate. X Morgan State University. I think it was. He might have been a college still then. When he was there, the August Meyer. Let's see. Oh, that's right, because there was this. That's what I couldn't get this article that I was looking for. Malcolm X, the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity, Inc. and Morgan State College. That's what it was when Malcolm got there for the August Meyer, who was a white professor, to debate Malcolm. And this was, what is the date of that? Did anybody put it in the chat already? I wonder if it's already in the chat. And why isn't it right there though? Meyer. I wonder if there's any footage of that somewhere. Because Malcolm was there to make the case for Black nationalism. March 28, 1962. So let me share that screen real quick so you can see what I'm talking about there. No, that's not it. That's not it. There it is. So that's a picture of it. Yeah. Chapter of Omega Psi Phi, March 28, 1962. The minister was invited to the university by the chapter to debate former Morgan professor Dr. August Meyer. Malcolm X argued the case for Black nationalism while Meyer defended integration. Right on. Right on. Very good. Dr. King, for his part, would speak at and then receive an honorary degree, June 2nd, 1958, a few years before that, as a commencement speaker at Morgan State College. And as I said, both Dr. King and Malcolm X were targets by the press in their lifetimes. Both were assassinated under unclear circumstances, which is something we're going to talk a little bit about more today. Both misrepresented posthumously, both have been misrepresented posthumously to have their radicalism downplayed. And as I was saying earlier, both are still relevant because the conditions against which both men were fighting and struggling and organizing are worse now. So it's or at best are not changing at rates commensurate with the need for that change, or with even the energies and the ideas and the arguments of those men and movements in particular. So as again, we've seen recent, I've talked about it here. We've talked about it constantly. We'll talk more about it this morning. These numerous recent attempts to, again, they're too big as figures and participants in history to omit. So they have to be constantly discussed, whether it's the Hulu series with Dr. King and the FBI, these several Netflix Malcolm X pieces. I would argue the Judas and the Black Messiah film would fit this sort of, and it's funny because I just was asked about it and shared it again. So in 2018, when I was arguing about the Vernon philosophy of Black media avoidance, I said, you know, I'm hearing about this Fred Hampton movie, and it's probably going to be a problem, and you know, unfortunately, I was right in that. And then, of course, we still have political prisoners. So that is to me, and I think not enough of us, but to many others, proof positive that the change in society that we would want has not occurred. Otherwise, Assata would have been welcomed home with a parade and a national, week-long celebration, with the redistribution and the changes of power that she was fighting for having taken place. We would have seen Mutulu out. We would see Sundiata out. We would see Leonard Peltier out. Mumia freed. I mean, all of these things would have long, Veranza Bowers, all of these things would have long occurred, or be occurring. So they are proof positive that their continued existence as political prisoners is proof positive that the change we're looking for has not occurred. So a little bit about the similarities in that media treatment, and this is just again from presentations I've been working with for several years, but just as a good reminder and a precursor to the specific discussion of this most recent hit on Malcolm by Disney and the like. Just again, in summary, the sources of the mainstream media and political hostility directed at Malcolm and Martin in their lifetime, and I would argue in perpetuity in media depictions, is that each of them expressed deep commitments to Black unity and to extending that unity to global and anti-colonial imperial struggles. And again, we won't go into it this morning, but or right now, but those unfamiliar with Dr. King's actual radical politics are intentionally uninformed. That lack of awareness is intended and been worked at for quite a long time, but it's something that needs to be changed, and that is something we would have to do separate from this discussion. Both Malcolm and Martin expressed fealty to anti-capitalist ideas, or said differently, they expressed affinity for socialism, even communism, certainly radical Pan-Africanism, and world majority unity. Each expressed strong and particular criticism of the Black bourgeoisie and white liberals. Each expressed zero confidence in legislation and conventional methods of protest politics. And each expressed support for direct action campaigns. That is, of course, most often forgotten and ignored when it comes to Dr. King. As Joshua Grimm has covered in his work on the subject, the New York Times as an exemplar, we would say in today's world, something like Twitter or even TikTok, constructed oppositional identities of the two Black leaders in their lifetime. Malcolm X was framed as the doppelganger to King. They were portrayed as opposite men with opposite goals. That's at least initially. As Kimberly Powell and Sonia Edmundson have said in their work on the subject, the media created an image of Malcolm X as a violent, power-hungry extremist who was primarily interested in harming the white population in the United States. Contrasting Malcolm X with Martin Luther King Jr. in the media fostered this negative image. The two men were described as opposite ends of a spectrum. King is advocating nonviolence. X is advocating violence. King as a Black minister. X as an ex-convict. King as a civil rights leader. X as a racial fanatic. Again, with Powell and Amundsen speaking specifically of Malcolm X's treatment in all of this, Black Muslims and thus Malcolm X were characterized as extremists within the media. And actually, I should correct myself because this is still part of the same hustle. Because yes, this is focused on Malcolm X, but I think it is important to be reminded that what is being done here is not just, again, as media studies has argued for a long time, we don't judge each other by who we are as much as we judge by who we are not. So in projecting Malcolm in this way, they are tacitly or implicitly saying we, as in the rest of society, Black or white, should reject all of these versions or approaches to whatever our interests or particular religions or politics are. So anyway, as Powell and Edmondson say, Black Muslims and thus Malcolm X were characterized as extremists within the media. The media created this image with the terms used to describe Malcolm X and Black Muslims: anti-Christian, anti-white, alienation, agitators, Black supremacy, bitter, confrontation, cult, enemy, extremist, exploit, hate, militant, separation, sect, threat, and trouble. These terms appeared frequently and with high intensity, shaping a negative image of Malcolm X in the media. All right, so I'm just using that to just, again, sort of set the context for what I want to say about this Malcolm, this Disney approach to Malcolm in this recent piece called Exonerated. I'm not going to get into the specifics. Actually, I think I misspoke earlier. I'm not intending to get into the specifics of Malcolm's assassination and who was charged and what went on, right or wrong, with their case. I'm more importantly wanting to make the point that the focus on the specifics of the case in this context is done intentionally, consciously or not, but intentionally. Even subconsciously, intentionally, to follow that media trend described just a moment ago. That is to depict the politics and the surroundings of Malcolm as a negative and as his mistaken trajectory coming back on him, as opposed to him being a threat to those in power, primarily because of the radical ideas he continued to advocate and work with. The ideas that never get discussed are rarely, if even mentioned, discussed with any accuracy or honesty, which leads us, by the way, what I think in some ways, directly or not, to where we ended up in that debate on Friday, where the radical freedom dreams of Fanon, the anti-colonial struggle, the collective concerns, the analysis, biting analysis of capitalism, all just fade away. The histories of the labor movement erased, so that a continued propagated approach to struggle that is largely based on entrepreneurialism and Black capitalism can be seen as legitimate, can be given all the free reign and support. And without the analytical resistance provided by people like Malcolm and Martin, it's easier to take hold. Okay, so with this piece, Exonerated, we get another Disney product run on ABC. And this is just from How to Watch Soul of a Nation, Exonerated, The Murder of Malcolm X. And the reason I just saved this piece is because of what it says here towards the end of this sort of PR. So it says the special will have interviews with Shahid Johnson, Amin Johnson, Khalil Ibn Islam, the children of the late Khalil Islam, who was also wrongfully convicted for the assassination of Malcolm X and posthumously exonerated, as well as Malcolm X's daughter, Ilyasa Shabazz. So I guess I should, let me just so for those who haven't seen it, aren't aware of this, or will not see it. This special episode profiles Muhammad Abdul Aziz, a man who was wrongfully convicted of Malcolm X's assassination. And then it, goes on to tell you, it's, featuring first TV interview with Aziz since his exoneration, conducted by ABC News Nightline co-anchor Byron Pitts. The special retraces Malcolm X's shocking 1965 assassination, Aziz's decades behind bars and on parole, and the devastating impact on Aziz's family. Exonerated features interviews with the family and advocates of Aziz, including his wife, Paula McClellan, son, Craig Butler, daughter, Idris B. Green, and independent historian Abdul Rahman Muhammad, as well as Peter Bailey, a friend and associate Malcolm. This didn't happen, by the way. I'm just rereading this now. I didn't see Bailey at all. Now, one of the points I am going to make, this is deep. I didn't catch this initially. Bailey isn't in this at all. Unless he got slipped. I can't, because they did try to slip in someone else. I'm gonna come back to that. But they interesting. Now we remember Brother Muhammad here is we'll come back to him as well a little bit, at least through his work, is the one that put together that Netflix documentary that's incorrect. He was featured in the Netflix series Who Killed Malcolm X. And I'll say he was featured in that series. But the work of Peter Goldman, Zach Kondo, William Sales was featured. We'll come back to that. But this was the line that I really, this was the one here that you know. Journalists, filmmakers, and activists reflect on the enduring legacy of Malcolm X and raise larger questions about how and why both the assassination and the wrongful convictions happened and why it took so long to resolve. Nah. So this was the point that I wanted to, that I'm focused on here. The enduring legacy of Malcolm X, because this is the point that I keep wanting to make, that while some might want to suggest that there's a loss of, at least, if not fully a lack of, relevance to discussing and being reminded of these histories and these men in particular, this is sort of the point I've been getting at, that the power structure sees a need to reflect on and remind us and impose on us their versions or their vision of that enduring legacy, so that we can't develop it on our own. The enduring legacy, I think, is unquestioned that it will exist at this point. Again, these are figures in histories, at least for the moment, that are too big to omit or fail, so to speak. At least fail in being included and discussed at all. But but what it means and how it's remembered is constantly to be competed over. Yeah, I made a note here because of what I'm going to show. One of the clips I'm going to show, not from that series, but from something else, to make a bigger point, is that this video is certainly, just like a lot of our videos, to be demonetized by the YouTube, Google overlords. So please do, when possible, support through Patreon or some other means, because whatever ad revenue this channel gets, it's never much. We're always in the yellow at best, but it's, this one is certainly to get demonetized. The documentary is okay. So the documentary is nominally about how the makers of the Netflix series Who Killed Malcolm X may have been too late in revealing who did kill Malcolm, but opened the door to the vindication of those who didn't. All right, so that's what Exonerated is about. How it's nominally about how, and what they're really intending to do is convince us that up until Abdul Rahman Muhammad's Netflix series, nobody knew who killed Malcolm. Nobody was talking about who killed Malcolm. No one had been talking about who killed Malcolm, and it was Netflix, and the let me pull this up here, and the good directors who brought in Brother Muhammad, who did that for us. Who Killed Malcolm X Filmmakers on Exoneration of 2 wrongly convicted men. Clues have been out there for decades. The clues had been out there, but it wasn't until Phil Bertelsen and Rachel Dretzen came together as the directors of Who Killed Malcolm X and brought in Brother Abdul Rahman Muhammad. And am I freezing? Hold on a second. I'm not seeing a lag, but I think I'm lagging here. You hear me fine. Yeah, I don't know. I'm seeing that now there's like a, but my video is lagging for some reason. It seems to be on my end. Yeah, you sure are. Yeah, I'm lagging. The video is freezing up. Yeah, this is yet another new problem because there's no sign like that there's a problem over here. The connection is good. The computer seems to be good. There aren't many tabs open. No, there are no browser windows open, Coco. That's what I'm saying. There's no observable reason as to why this would be happening. Let's see. This is crazy, frustrating. Not sure what the issue is or what I could do about it. Yeah, so any sharing of the screen causes a problem. Like I don't that's terrible. All right. What is he saying here? Consider his or her argument. I'm driving, damn it. Kids are TikToking. Yeah, no, nobody's even. Yeah, anyway. All right, let me see if I could continue. So let's see if this freezes it up again. If it's just that if it's just that simple. Anyway, so as I was saying that what Exonerated is doing, this latest from Disney, is, and it is like a is that they are claiming that, again, that the Netflix documentary broke new ground and created a situation where, despite the information or clues being out there for decades, it was the production of this 2019 Netflix documentary that they say helped lead to the reopening of the 50-year-old case and to the exoneration of Muhammad A. Aziz and Khalil Islam. And as they point out, that from the production of that series, suddenly Who Killed Malcolm X turned into Who Didn't. And their point was that William Bradley, a member, died in 2018. So everybody knew that, once it was discovered William Bradley had done it, was the missing killer. It was then, by the Netflix documentary, turned into an issue of not who killed Malcolm X, but who didn't. So we know that it was that it was William Bradley is the point. And therefore the question is, let's turn to who didn't, and they could turn around and exonerate Islam and Aziz. And of course they deserve to be exonerated. So that's not the question here. One of the points, again, is that the argument is that the Netflix series that we've already talked about, the links are already in the show notes below, that the Netflix series broke new ground, and that it was under the tough journalism of Brother Muhammad and his white Netflix directors, that they could break this new ground and free these brothers and tell us finally who did and who did not kill Malcolm. Now, of course, and this isn't, and this is just to be perfectly fair, when it's just it's fascinating that so as we pointed out, the Netflix series itself, and let me open that part up if I can. Netflix series, Who Killed Malcolm X? So when the argument, again, that when this Netflix series, and again, please do check the show notes below for all of the previous discussion we've had on that, some of which I'm going to actually play. But I did my own podcast, full breakdown of the response, but that's linked below. But we're gonna look at we're gonna look more importantly at someone else's response in a minute. But again, these are the directors, and as they talk about in their own work, they found the described journalism of Abdur Rahman Muhammad, who had sort of popularized himself on YouTube, I believe, or Facebook, by showing some of that grainy video from back in the day of William Bradley being, I believe, in a Cory Booker, Newark, New Jersey commercial. So it was almost like a perfect coming together of a perfect storm of ignoble spokespeople. For many of us, myself included, for whatever that matters, but many others, Brother Muhammad wasn't known in at least in the DC, Maryland area for this work or being associated with this work. No, I'm not aware that anybody had heard of him. And in fact, his work, as we've talked about, is based largely on the work of Manning Marable. And for some reason, that goes somewhat credited. In fact, yeah, it's really interesting how it is or is not credited. And I want to just quickly, nope, that's not it. I know sometimes this doesn't seem like it, but I do be labeling stuff and putting stuff places, and then it just doesn't seem to show up when in places where I think I put them in that moment. So just bear with me for a quick second. Oh yeah, for instance, I had the. But this is what I'm looking for. So for instance, so as I was saying, so Bertelsen and Dresden, and again a little bit of foreshadowing. It's through Dresden, Rachel Dresden, who worked with on the let me see, it'll even tell us here. She worked on with Henry Louis Gates on the African Americans Many Rivers to Cross documentary. So the connection to Henry Louis Gates it seems through her, and that's again a little bit of foreshadowing. But they come together to put this. And again, I'm not aware. Again, no, I don't really mean to be disrespectful to say this way, but I do admit that I feel like if for in the last 20-25 years, if you were in the DC, Maryland area doing historical research on Malcolm X and hanging around Sankofa books, I feel like I would have at least heard of you. That is my assumption. I could be wrong on that, but I'm also not aware of anybody else who was familiar with the brother's work. So when he pops up as the leading historian on the assassination of Malcolm X and uncovering all this history, one question was, well, we know from the Netflix documentary, because you show us going into Sankofa, and this is a screenshot from that scene. You show us going in, that you and your son go into Sankofa books, and you show us that the Manning Marable book is the book. They set up the thing just like this to juxtapose Marable's book next to ours. And then they say, nah, and they point to his, and then they pick his up, said, this is the one you need, right? So in other words, we get dissed in Sankofa books, which I admit still is a little hurtful, a little hateful. But they're clearly dissing us and assuring us that it's Marable's work that is what he is working from, which it was, again, my argument from jump, that we had to criticize Marable's work and be on record as doing so, because it would in perpetuity be used, ever echoing as the new standard for the history in future work. And sure enough, of course, that's the case. Because again, Muhammad admits that that's the book he's using, but then oddly does not admit it when it comes to where he discovered this information about Bradley being the killer. So even if you go back to, as I'm showing you here, Manning Marable's book, there are 28 matches for references to Bradley. In short order, 2 more NOI members joined the Newark conspiracy. Willie X. Bradley was 26 years old, tall, dark in complexion, and heavy set, with a history of violence. It was decided that the initial round aimed at Malcolm, the decisive kill shot, would be fired by William Bradley. In fact, Marable had said for years that one of his goals was to get Bradley arrested. Charles 37X Kenyatta also flopped to the floor and later claimed he did not see anything. Several eyewitnesses' accounts suggest that Bradley then pivoted to his left and may have fired a second blast above the heads of the audience. So this is alleged murderer Willie Bradley went into a life of crime. So I mean, so the idea that it was Muhammad and Netflix that broke this. Now, again, as we've talked about repeatedly, and the link to that work is in the show notes below. Marable is getting that information from others, Peter Goldman, and please go check out. And I think please check out the Riot Starter Kalanji did with Paul Lee and Peter Goldman. And I'll just say right here, because Peter Goldman shows up at the very end of this Exonerated piece to say literally one line, something to the effect that I've been trying to get this done my entire life. That is, get these brothers exonerated, because everybody has known that they weren't the ones. And you got to think about that again. When you see Exonerated, or if you've seen Exonerated, remember, they have Peter Goldman in a full setup. He's got a beautiful scenery set. They show you the clips of him actually getting up even from the set. So they got him in the well-lit and microphone, got him all dressed, all set up. And all he shows up on this thing is for one line. And it's if, going back to the clip I just showed, or the headline I just showed, or the story I just showed, that they want to make the point, you fools have been out here struggling all these years, couldn't get it done, couldn't put the clues together, couldn't get the work done. We come in. Henry Louis Gates's white folks and Netflix and Muhammad using Marable's work, which is using other people's work, Goldman's included, Kondo's included. And we come back to tell you, now this is what it is. And then we're going to sit down and we're going to have these nice interviews with Aziz and Islam's family, and everybody's going to talk about how great it is that they got out or got exonerated. And we already knew William Bradley did it, so it's not like we got to solve the murder anymore. We can just get you out and it's all good. And then we're going to have Peter Goldman come in, get them all situated in a nice setup and a nice whatever, and what did do, or what did and we're going to give him the one line to say, I've been trying to do this for years. By the way, Riot Starter tonight at 4:00. OG Kamasi speaks on George Jackson, Bunchy Carter, and the prison movement. Tonight, Riot Starter right here in Black Power Media. So shout out to Kalanji and all of them doing that good work. All right, we're gonna keep it moving here. So that was pretty slick. That was pretty slick how they did that. And I wanted to, let's see. All right, I already showed that one. Filmmakers. All right. So I already did that. All right, right. Showed you. We already looked at who the filmmaker, the director, right. So as I've written here, they wanted to cover, right. They wanted to manage the enduring legacy of Malcolm X, which is why you get the same run-of-the-mill story. And they do mention the FBI was surveilling him. You hear the FBI was there, around, that is. But the whole story, but that's again just quickly mentioned, and then the whole story just becomes the Nation of Islam killed Malcolm, and these two brothers, William Bradley, and that's really the whole thing. And there's never, again, which is the beautiful tactic here, there's never a discussion of, well, what was it that made Malcolm such a threat? What was it that made Malcolm such a challenge beyond he called out Elijah Muhammad? But that's why the FBI was following him. Well, we already know that because they were very clear in their own counterintelligence program documents that he was a threat to national security, for internationalizing the struggle, all the things that we've already sort of covered here already, but none of that is brought up. Again, the routine of ignoring Malcolm's politics would made him a threat, downplaying the role of the government and consistently diminishing the potential revolutionary impact on younger generations that Malcolm might have by reducing him to just another sort of making a murder a crime series. That's what I wrote here in my notes. That you get that this is just another sort of, it's like tapping into that whole new thing of podcasting and documentary filmmaking. Let's look at the making a murderer thing, and you lose all of the beautiful radicalism that Malcolm still represents for most of us. And that's sort of the point. All right, so as I mentioned, earlier, there is a sort of somewhat of a structural analysis I wanted to bring to this, or add to this, or give us for some food for thought on when considering these products. So I, just wanted to pull up just a little bit, as I said, of what was some foreshadowing earlier. In terms of the Netflix piece, now I know this most recent thing was on Disney and ABC, although there's overlap there as well. 2.2 billion, 24 let's see, Netflix 12 income and revenue, or 2 billion, 24 billion revenue. The top three individual shareholders: Leslie Kilgore, David Hyman, Greg Peters. I'm less interested in that at the moment. It's the institutional ones. The institutional investors hold the majority of Netflix shares at about 83% of the total shares. So the top three individual folks are relatively irrelevant when it comes to where the majority of the shares are held. And this is where you start to see some of those familiar names. Capital Research Global Investors, of course, you get the Vanguard Group and BlackRock, and those are the sort of two that come up everywhere: Google, Alphabet, Amazon, Netflix, Hulu. So not much other than that, just to say that that these folks see these shows and these series and these networks as products, as part of what will bring revenue to their shareholders. And I see sharing, speaking of sharing and shareholders, when I share my screen, for some reason it goes crazy, and I'm literally sharing one tab at a time. So it's like there's not even any tabs open on the daggone thing. It's crazy. Anyway, so and as we've talked about before, remember I showed you a video a couple weeks ago, where Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, had demanded of those who want his institutional investment, and a part of they command like $9 trillion in capital that they control. He said, you have to do better at offering up those virtue signals. Are you doing, you got to have something for the environment. You got to have some multicultural diversity. You got to have some LGBTQ. He's saying that. And of course, everybody who's big wants that money. So again, it's not a one-to-one. It's not necessarily the smoking gun evidence, but it's just something I like to be reminded of, and to remind others of, that these media, even the ones we like, are themselves really small, tiny products meant of international conglomerates, of hedge funds, private equity groups that are only wanting a return and wanting to project an ideological sort of safety net for themselves into the world. So it isn't, I think, something to be taken lightly, even if we're not, looking for this, again, supposed smoking. So that was just one. And then for Disney, if I can pull it up, it's essentially just to show you the same thing, that the leading institutional investors of Disney, it's the same thing here. So you see here, right at the top, Vanguard, and then number 3 is BlackRock. And they're actually on here twice. 3 times. Actually, I'm not sure how that works. But these are the notable holders of Disney stock. So, and then when the new theyrule.net comes out, I'll be able to do like a lot of what I used to do, where you show the interlocking board of directors very easily in a nice little fun map. And you can see that at the end of the day, it's not even that diverse in terms of the ownership. In other words, the boards of directors have all of these groups have boards of directors who sit on each other's boards. So, all right. So So I did want to remind that not only are these Disney and Netflix products, but that Disney and Netflix are themselves products of smaller entities. And that, of course, ABC, the channel on which this aired, is a subsidiary of Disney and has long been. So I'll just skip that slide, given what's going on over here, and get to this next one. So I want to show a clip, and this was the part that I'm sure is going to get me demonetized. And I think because the channel which I'm borrowing from here, Film Theory, is so huge that I don't think they worry about being monetized on YouTube. Their Patreon or whatever else kicks in. But in this thing in this clip I want to share from Film Theory, which is about a broader argument. It's kind of funny. The channel's funny itself, and they're not intending to make the political argument I'm making, of course, or any of us would be making. But what their video is showing is that basically it's talking about why did Disney buy up Marvel, and what is Disney trying to do with Marvel, or how does Marvel fit into Disney's broader plans? Long story short, well, we'll come back. Long story short is it's intellectual property. But there's a particular thing that is referenced as a Disney technique in this clip that I think relates particularly well to the argument I'm trying to make here about why they keep coming back, that is, major media keep coming back to do these posthumous assaults and rebranding efforts on people like King and Malcolm. So hopefully this will work out well. And let's check this out.
The mouse. First, it's important to understand who we're actually up against here. When we're talking about Marvel, what we're really talking about is Disney. And Disney doesn't do cycles of beginnings and endings the same way everyone else does. It's actually ingrained in the company's origins. Back before Disney started making movies, if a film failed at the box office, that was usually the last you heard of it. Television was only just coming into being, reruns weren't even a word yet, and the idea of re-releasing anything but a successful movie would have been a pretty big novelty. It's actually estimated that more than 50% of movies made before 1950 are literally gone forever because unless they were a big hit, nobody bothered to save a physical copy of it. 50%! Think about how much lost media that is. But Disney originated in the world of animation, a world that is all about saving and reutilizing assets. Before computers, animators would have to draw each cell by hand. So to make life easier, the animators would just draw different characters over the same cells. Classic example of this, Sleeping Beauty's final dance is copied identically for Beauty and the Beast's iconic ballroom waltz. Stuff like this makes it immediately apparent why it would never make sense to throw this away. Everything has value. Did you know that Fantasia, Alice in Wonderland, Pinocchio, Peter Pan, even Bambi were all either box office disappointments or just outright money-losing films when they first came out? In fact, things got so rough for Disney that the shareholders basically forced Walt to just do Snow White again in the form of Cinderella so he could have an actual hit. So then why are all these considered to be among the most recognized and creatively accomplished Disney films of all time? PR, where the bigger film studios of the golden age of cinema mostly disdained television as the lesser medium that would cheapen the art form. Sound familiar much? Uncle Walt got himself a TV show to promote all the stuff that his studio was doing, while also rehabilitating the reputations of the Disney movies that didn't initially get the best reception in theaters.
Perhaps an outstanding example of this occurs in the opening scenes of our cartoon feature, Bambi.
As a result, a generation of baby boomers remember them as foundational Disney classics because shrewdly, Disney regularly replayed the most memorable parts of those films on his show, eventually priming them for a more successful theatrical re-release and permanent life as physical attractions at Disney parks. For an excellent example of this, just check out Sorcerer's Apprentice Mickey with that red robe and his wizard's hat. Probably the second most famous Mickey look ever, and it's from Fantasia, one of the least successful big Disney movies of all time. Now that is taking a lemon and turning it into lemonade. Now, with that context, ask yourself this. Why was such a huge chunk of Avengers Endgame dedicated to revisiting events from Thor: The Dark World of all movies? The most panned MCU production up to that point. Well, maybe, in true Walt form, Endgame was making that movie cool to revisit because, well, it might not be good, but let me tell ya, it pays off 13 movies down the line line as part of this epic conclusion. And you see, that's Disney's other little secret to success here. Well, everyone thinks that they're in the movie business. They're really not. Or at least that's just a small portion of what they care about. They're actually in the IP business, owning cultural touchstones and then making money from all the clothes, toys, costumes, food tie-ins, and rides that stem off of it. Honestly, we could probably dedicate a whole video just to the idea that Disney, much like McDonald's, is a company just as much about theme parks and real estate as they are about movies and TV shows, but that's a digression for another day. If you're interested in seeing it, it is an episode that'll come out, so hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss it. But you see, that's the secret sauce here. For other movie studios, a film needs to earn a lot of money at the box office for it to be worth making.
All right, that was good. That was it. That was really, that'll suffice. So for our purposes, or my own at least, is the cell regeneration that is being described there, that is the reuse of previous animated cells for the ease of reproduction and mass dissemination. I'm thinking of ideologically. So when they talk about, so if you think of it from an IP perspective, so to speak, and dominant media in this society, Malcolm X initially was a failed product. He didn't hit properly in the box office of societal ideological production. Once assassinated physically, he can be those pre-existing cells of, or those pre-existing produced images and sounds and even written words of Malcolm can be repackaged, represented, recharacterized and contextualized and turned into a hit for Disney specifically, but society writ large. So again, ideologically speaking, Malcolm in his original form was a failure. His affinity for nationalism, Black liberation, anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism, guerrilla warfare, armed self-defense, that ideologically is unacceptable. It's a failure from the perspective of mainstream corporations or society itself. Ideologically, it's a failure. But to Disney's point, that failure need not be discarded forever. That failure, we just need the intellectual property, especially once physically removed from the earth. Malcolm becomes more valuable, just like artists. And Disney can bring him back. The ideological apparatus can bring him back, resituate him, and make not only financial gain, but ideological gain. Particularly in a moment, as I continue to argue, we're in, where every issue can be raised to a level of national, public, popular, distorted, liberalized, narrowed conversation. It is of great value in a moment like this to be able to dig back into those Disney archives and bring out some old IP. Again, Malcolm is not here anymore. And apparently those who would accurately reflect or represent his work and ideas aren't involved in any of this, can't be involved in any of this, unless in a way we're going to get to, and I'll, remind everybody of shortly. So even in going back to admittedly some of my own particular work on this issue, but others who have looked critically at the role of intellectual property, this is the point, that intellectual property has always been about the management of ideas. Who owns and therefore can control the dissemination and, of course, the benefit financially from that dissemination of those ideas. While others have focused on it traditionally economically, I'm more interested in even economically what this means, but ideologically, politically, what does it mean? That is, it's about the control and ownership of ideas and who can disseminate what ideas. And then to the point of Huey Newton, and power being the ability to define phenomena and have it act in a desired manner. It's of prime importance. And then even to the point made in that little clip to Disney's strategy, even when you take the previously failed IP and repackage it and redistribute it. Again, yes, there is financial gain there, but the importance is it's reinscribed in the generations of the youth. So then a generation of youth have grown up thinking, like my generation, that Bambi was this, that, and the other. It was a failed IP. Today's youth, particularly Black youth and anti-colonial youth and those in political struggle youth, are encouraged, at least, to pick up a Malcolm, if at all, under this false and misunderstood rebranding of the original, or at least in terms of the impact. So Bambi did not have that original impact that that character would later have. The IP was picked up, repackaged, rebranded, and then imposed on another generation in a different way, using a different medium of communication, the television versus the film. And that new generation grew up, like mine, thinking of Bambi in a different way. My generation would have never thought Bambi was some formerly discarded, failed product. Today's generation would never think of, or is not meant to think of, Malcolm or King or others in their original form, or in the form that brought their original impact on this society, because that original impact ideologically from the perspective of those in power was a failure. This new version, absent socialism, Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, guerrilla warfare, redistribution, anti-imperialism, direct action. This version is now a hit. We could talk about them all day. We could talk about how their brothers killed them. We can talk about how the FBI was around, but it was the Muslims. We could talk about how, everybody was surveilling King, but he was cheating on Coretta. We could talk about, we could do all of that. We can do all of that because this is the reapportioned or the repackaged acceptable IP. So when it comes to the exonerated thing, I'll just go through a couple things in my notes here that I think make my point, that specifically are in this thing. The best thing about exonerated, and I admit accept all the critique for my shallowness on this, but the absolute best thing about this series is that we get to see and hear from Cheryl Lee Ralph again. Shout out to Cheryl Lee Ralph. For those of us of a certain generation, I mean, she doesn't get the credit she deserves. When we think about that pantheon, but you know, Cheryl Lee Ralph. So that was the best thing. That was the best thing. Just to because you know, sometimes I have students or somebody, you know, you never know. I just want to make sure we're all clear who I'm talking about here. Cheryl Lee Ralph still looks and sounds amazing. It was great to see her again. And this is what I'm saying. Like, personally, I don't like I feel like they're messing with me when they do this kind of stuff. Like don't use my favorites against me like that. And you know, one of my favorite roles, she was in one of my favorite movies, one of I think Eddie Murphy's unheralded bests, but The Distinguished Gentleman, which I think is a great film politically as well. Like, it's a strong film politically, and her role in that is fantastic. So shout out to Cheryl Lee Ralph. And I also didn't know until recently, because of the aftermath of this nonsense about Cosby, she was actually originally going to be was in the running for Mrs. Cosby, the role of Mrs. Cosby. I'm not mad. Even though I don't like her politically much now, no disrespect. And I don't like the movie she's been in per se, but I can't be mad at Felicia Rashad getting that role. I'm not mad at that. I'm still hurt that I watched live her get it proposed to by Ahmad Rashad. And then, as I was saying, but right after that, so they punch you in the mouth with the beauty and the magnificence of Ralph, and then they come right back with the Netflix dude, as I wrote in my notes, Brother Muhammad, to remind us that he was the one, as I started off with it, that he was the one. His work is what got us to this point, you know, and with all due respect, it seems like, you know, Aziz, you know, in some pictures and interviews gives him a lot of credit. So, and all credit due. So if that got them out, you know, congratulations. I can't be mad at that. I can't be mad at that. Oh yeah, it's almost 10 o'clock already. I'm not even done. My bad. I'm about to be late. I had to tell the fellas I'm gonna be late, to be a few minutes late. I got a little more to go here. So apologies, everybody. It then proceeds to actually get a little worse, because you then get the punditry in this thing, and this is sort of the point about the rebranding of the IP. Malcolm didn't work back then, but he works today, because if he could be used to give Mr. Blue Vest and the neoliberal activist leadership cover and credibility, then the new IP of Malcolm X is perfect. That is, you know, we get well, you know who Blue Vest is. Linda Sarsour, you know, and Ilyasa Shabazz. I mean, you know, how could I be critical of Malcolm's daughter? So I'll just stay focused on the product. As it says here, you know, we do get a vague reference to the FBI fomenting problems, but no detail or exploration, and it's right back to rebranding and the punditry and the limiting story of his assassination. ABC News hosts replacing legit spokespeople. So that's, again, like, you know, again, now I'll show you why in a few minutes, maybe why he wasn't there, but they claimed that Peter Bailey was going to be in it. I didn't see Bailey in there, and I'm hoping he thought better of it. There's no Zach Kondo. There's no, you know, none of the people who have been, even of my generation, who have, you know, who had been doing that work are involved, like Kalanji or Kamau or Kali Akuno or I mean, whoever else. I mean, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if I know them or not. But the people who are doing that kind of that work with those similar politics are not there. They're being replaced by the people I've already mentioned, these ABC News folks. Nothing about the ideas of Malcolm and his work. We get a balancing of the threats. The thought of the perceived threat of the FBI is balanced by the threat from the community. And the fear of the Hanafi Muslims and coming after those who are accused of killing Malcolm. So right. When they talk about all of the previous work that has been done, they mention Peter Goldman's work and they picture Peter Goldman, but only the Netflix dude, that is Brother Muhammad, is there as a spokesperson. And then again, they take credit for the discoveries which they take from Marable, which really come from Zach Kondo and Peter Goldman himself. That is the discoveries of who was the killer. So then the district attorney Cyrus Vance comes in and looks all heroic. There's no, Carl Evans doesn't even go mentioned, though even Marable credits him. And then Goldman gets his one line at the end of the movie, at the end of the show, where he says, "I've been trying to do this for years. That is, get these accused killers freed." So then I wrote a note to myself: look at the intervention now being made as we predicted, from Marable to Phil Bertelsen to Rachel Dretson to Abdul Rahman Muhammad to Disney, Netflix, and the like. These are the folks that get to speak for and interpret Malcolm X for us. It's a really slick and infuriating, frankly, thing to witness, to watch. So again, as I said, actually, no, let me show you why I just want to remind folks, some of you, hopefully many of you would have seen this by now, but a clip from also in the show notes, a clip from the roundtable we had last year on the on Our Work, Alive Reinvention, Correcting Manning Marable's Malcolm X, and a reflection on the Netflix series that is championed in this Disney series, or this Disney, special edition, whatever. And I think says a lot. So before we do close, I do want to play this clip where Zach Kondo is heard explaining, I mean, it's self-explanatory, but I do want to play this clip and then come back before we wrap up. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. This is where I definitely agree with Sundiata, if he in fact was that conscious and aware of the final product. And we couldn't, at the time I felt it, but we couldn't, certainly I don't think we could make the argument in print. But in the years since, listening to Wendy Wolf, the editor, and her presentations on the book, and seeing the feeble condition Marable was in that last video where he's holding up the book, I could easily see how he wouldn't have been able to be aggressive or competently, involved enough. And then also politically, it's a departure from so much of his other work. So that's why that's the other thing that was always struck me as a problem with what was done with this book. But I just want to say I'm very glad that we did this because I was confident, and I think it's been shown to be correct that Marable's book would be echoing negatively for years. And I was wanting to have us be part of documenting some sort of attempt to resist and challenge it. So I like it. And Todd, I think you pointed this out to me. I like when you go to Wikipedia and find, the Marable book, our book is listed. Even when Netflix hated on us. And Baba Zach, I definitely want to ask you about this because I'm not going to lie, I'm not at you, obviously. I would never be mad at you, but I was mad to see that you and Brother Bailey were in there. And to see what was done. So I would definitely want to ask you about that because there's that one scene, and personally I was offended that they did it in DC at Sankofa Books that I spent many years building in that spot, many years working with people in that spot. Never saw none of the brothers involved with the Netflix documentary in that space, but they come and use that space to hate on us, where you see him they have the two books, ours and Marable's, juxtaposed on the shelf, and it's a quick scene where they go in and they grab Marable's book and say, "No, this is the one you want." And I was just like, man, that is so. And meanwhile, they're interviewing Brother Bailey and Baba Zach as keynote historians for the piece. Anyway, anyway, my point is, I'm very glad. Paul, go ahead.
Jared, go ahead. I just want to Zach, can I just ask Jared something real quick? Because he said something. He said he would never be mad at you. He said he would never be mad at you. I've never heard him say that before. Never be mad. So that's nice. That's all I want to say, Jared.
Imagine me getting mad at Baba Zach. That would be insane. The point I was mad at how I thought that they were doing him and the rest of us. That's what I thought. So, and then Baba, when you said what you said in your initial response to when you saw the Netflix piece, I felt vindicated. But anyway, please, if you would, talk a little bit about maybe that experience, and then anything else about how the response you've seen to your work or our work or any of this.
Right. Yeah. First off, the Netflix piece, if I could, I would airbrush every scene that I was in it. I regret it was a mistake on my part. I've been in a lot of documentaries, Malcolm, the Black Panthers, different things like that. This is the only documentary that I've ever been in that I realized it was a mistake. But I didn't know it was a mistake, in part because I didn't do my homework. The first mistake that I made, and normally I would do this, and I can't figure out why I didn't do it this time, is I would find out who the producer was. I didn't. I knew that the people who were doing the filming and stuff, I talked to them, and I knew some of their other work, some of which I didn't, really appreciate. But I didn't find out until they had filmed me. At the end of the last filming is when I realized that Skip Gates was the producer. And we've had this conversation, Jared. If I would have known that Skip Gates was behind that film when they first contacted me, I would have said hell to the no. But I didn't know that. And so I have to live with that. Okay? Because I don't trust Gates. I've seen his documentaries. I don't respect him, as an African scholar, because I don't think he considers himself an African scholar. I think he considers himself a scholar who happens to be Black. So I don't have no time for Skip Gates. But if I would have knowing his commercialization history and other things, no discussion was needed. I would have called it a day, but I didn't know that. I also had no idea what angle they were coming from, because all I did, and they interviewed me twice. I I went up to Brooklyn one time and they interviewed me like most of the day. And then they came to my college and they interviewed me all day. They came at around 7:15. I had a class at 8 o'clock. They came into the classroom and they basically stayed with me until 7:30 that night. And I spent the bulk of that time talking about the FBI and the NYPD and their role in Malcolm's assassination. And when they interviewed me in Brooklyn, I spent the bulk of the time talking about the nation, the FBI, and the NYPD. So I'm thinking, that, I'm giving them some good stuff. And then when I see the film, I'm there all day at my college. And when I see the film, they had 10 seconds. They showed a scene where we were sitting down at my desk. Muhammad was sitting next to me. I guess he asked the question, something like that. And then that was pretty much it. But that wasn't the worst part. I can deal with that. The worst part about that film is that, and it's real clear, now what Gates and whoever funded it, what they were really all about. It was about basically showing the Nation of Islam's role in Malcolm's assassination. It was about simplifying Malcolm's assassination, as complex as it was. They wanted to simplify it to make the point that maybe possibly behind the scenes, the FBI might have, did a little bit here and there, but they had nothing to do with the actual assassination. Same thing to NYPD. That was the political angle of that film. And see, my thing is this, and I don't need to say this to y'all, but the nation deserves to be, pulled out there. No problem with that. That's what I do in my book. But how the hell can you put all this emphasis on the nation, but you ignore all of the disruptive tactics that the FBI and the NYPD were doing? And I well documented it. And this was also real interesting. And I didn't realize until at the end what that was about. When I was talking about the FBI, and I would talk, and I would, sometimes pull out my book and give them a citation and all that type of stuff. Their thing to me was, but do you have a copy of the actual document? Huh? I wrote the damn book 26 years ago. In my office right now, do I have a copy of the damn documents? No, I don't have a copy of the documents. But that is what they needed in, from what I can gather now, that's what they needed in order to put it in the, in order to, I guess, validate my statements about the FBI. Even if I'm reading directly from a document, they didn't want to hear it for legal reasons and all that type of stuff. But here's the thing. When it came to talking about the nation and all of the different, all the garbage that the nation was doing, you didn't need no extra documents. They wasn't asking for no damn FBI files and all that when it came to the nation. Whatever you got to say, we want to hear it for the nation. But if you're going to talk about the FBI, we need, for liability and legal reasons, we need to see some type of credible sources type of stuff. And it has to be the actual sources. No, that was a that really was a charade. Yeah. And like I said, if I could take it back, I would take it back. My understanding is they're doing a second one, and they need not knock on my door. Not to mention the fact that there was nothing, and I want to make this point real clear, because the more, I've only been able to see this film one time. I mean, excuse me, 1.5 times. I started seeing, I saw it the first time, and I was, and the second time, I couldn't see it. I was watching it with my wife, and we were watching for a little bit, and then I realized I started falling asleep, and then I realized it wasn't that I was tired, it's that I did not want to waste no more time with this bullshit. Yeah. But here's the thing. There was nothing in that documentary that represented new information that had not already substantively been covered in my book. Nothing of substance.
And the same can be said about Manning's book.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
Manning is presented as his own idea of the theory of what happened, the actual players and so forth around Malcolm's assassination. And if I don't remember the quip exactly, but basically he said something to the effect that all those books in the 80s didn't amount to much.
On page 490, he says something to the effect that everything written in the 90s is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Which would include Baba Zat, sales.
Yeah.
Right. But here's something interesting. I talked to Marable maybe about a year or so before his book came out and he transitioned. And we were talking on the phone. And what Marable says to me is he says that, how much he appreciated my book. And he said that my book was the gold standard. So then I was real curious when his book came out to see what he said about my book or about me. And I think I'm a reference. I think I'm a reference somewhere in there. I'm an endnote. I'm a footnote or something like that. But it's like that's not what this guy's telling me, your analysis and your ability to penetrate issues and people, he's giving me all this stuff. And then, like I said, there was like I saw one reference and that was it. I don't know, I mean, I didn't know Marable that well, but I was kind of scratching my head a little bit on that one.
There it is. So I just always like to remind people of that. I think that's one of the, I'm happy to be corrected on this. I think that's one of the few rare public examples of somebody saying that they regret being included in a documentary or something like that. No, I'm sure that's happened before. I'm tripping. I take that back. But it's got to be rare. But I don't know. I might be tripping on that. I take that. It seems rare that you would hear from somebody. But anyway, so before I do want to, actually, I don't have to rush off. So if anybody has any questions or comments that are in the live, please bring them up. I just want to wrap up here by saying, just reiterating again, that this is that I think to whatever extent it was done, to whatever extent we're able to continue to do this. I think we do need to continue to remind people that as symbols, never mind the importance to their individual lives, and I don't mean to diminish that, but as symbols, Dr. King and Malcolm X remain essential, beyond relevant. Not only should they to us who want revolution, who want real change, who want a new and improved world, but to those who don't. And this is why we continue to get the media products that we do. And I again think that includes some of the work we've discussed here. Like this, the Netflix documentary Who Killed Malcolm X, or this one even, the recently released Judas and the Black Messiah, about which I think we've raised some serious questions and commentary around here. And even this one related to Dr. King that we've also talked about here, Dr. King and the FBI, and others in the pop cultural and documentary space. I mean, these to those in power, these men remain important as symbols because of what they represented as threats to the state, conservative racists, the black bourgeoisie, and white liberals alike. Their media representation does continue to reflect how they were and are still being used to direct righteous anger and radicalism into safe and convenient tributaries, often managed by corporate and nonprofit liberal structures. That the press in their life targeted and intentionally used Malcolm and King as symbols against one another personally, but also the movements and politics they represented. And posthumously, each of them, post-assassination, that is, have continued to suffer these assaults that come packaged as honors, commemorations, symbolic virtue signaling, but are really gross distortions of who these men were and what they represent and continue to mean to many people who do want revolutionary change in this world. And ultimately, as Dhoruba bin Wahad has said about Malcolm, when we're always asked what would the world be like were men like that, or were those two men in particular still alive, they would be political prisoners. So we should be reminded by the continued existence of political prisoners that the movements, the politics, the ideas that King and Malcolm actually worked with are still relevant, and the movements in the world that they were trying to achieve has not come close to coming into being. So, all right, let me stop there. I'll stop there on this portion, and if folks have any comments or questions, I'm happy to get to them. So I don't know. I mean, I feel no need to particularly reach out to him. I don't know that he would, but I don't suppose I'm particularly, that is the question. Would I have Abdul Rahman Muhammad on the show? I don't think I'm particularly opposed to it. I'm not particularly interested. And I say that, and maybe I'm wrong, but and the reason I'm not particularly interested is that maybe it's just because I just did this in another context, but I'm not interested in giving him I'm not interested in giving him another platform to promote the work, and to the extent that whatever, but also I don't know to what extent he would be interested in debating the quality of what ultimately is someone else's directorial work in terms of the Netflix piece. So what would I be asking him? Why are you taking other credit for everything? I mean, I would, he did go on WHUR here in the DC area and say that no one else on the planet had done what he had done. And he made specific to, so I would be interested in asking him, how he could defend that, and what does that mean in light of the work of Goldman, Kondo, Evans. I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think that the problem is people like Spike Lee and Colin who try, Kaepernick, I'm assuming, who try to pretend they are like Malcolm or Dr. King, are ultimately pretenders to the throne. The biggest reason that any of us would be pretenders to the throne is that the movements that propelled King and Malcolm don't exist. So this is why I was always trying to give room, even to Spike Lee and Colin Kaepernick. I mean, there was a moment when Spike Lee came to Towson, I think Towson State, to give a talk in Maryland years ago to promote his work. So this would have been in the mid-90s, early mid-90s. And after hearing him talk, I did go up on the mic, and I was hostile from the beginning. I was a younger hostile, and I said, so I opened up by saying, now that you've talked, because he ended his lecture by talking about how important it was. And I've always remembered this. It's important that when a Black film comes out in a theater, that it be supported in the first weekend. You can't say, I'm going to go see it even a week later, because by then decisions have been made as to how long it'll be left in the theater. They need that first weekend hit. So if there's a movie you ever want to support, you got to see it immediately. That was what I took from that. And I but so he ended by so the first thing I said was, now that you've told us how to make you money, you know, and then I proceeded to say something like, well, you know, why did you leave out someone in the radical politics of Malcolm in the Malcolm X movie? Something like that. And because I remember his response was something like, well, Malcolm wasn't a Marxist. So I didn't use that word. I remember specifically, I didn't use that language, but he took from it that's where I was going. And he said, well, Malcolm wasn't a Marxist. And he went on to And then apparently I was told the microphone I was on got its sound cut. So I didn't get a response. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is that I even when I've tried to give them room, given the context that they're working in, or even when I've been critical of them, I do try to give them room given the context that they're working in. I mean, and I think that, you know, part of understanding all of us as pretenders to the throne would be understanding that it was broader movements that propelled these individuals to their greatness. You know, you know what? I mean, the only reason I would want to respond to this, or I would think it's relevant, is in the way that Greg Thomas thought it was relevant in our Alive reinvention. And speaking, you know, and you know, shout out to Greg Thomas. You know, the dude is crazy brilliant. Not a fan of me, your boy. You know. But he got, but you know, but this is the only way that but his is the way I think that question should be responded to. What kind of sex did old Manning like, if he actually had sex at all? Was he into oral, vaginal, anal, or all of it? Did he do it in couples, groups? Did he use condoms, or like it raw, like old dirty bastard? Before he died, he never turned a trick or have sex for profit, whether he liked it or not. Honestly, how many penises apart from his alleged own, assuming he had one, of course, did this sex of Maribels involve over time, from his pubescent adolescence to his waning years? And what was up with his move from one wife or marriage to another, as he moved from one college or university to another in the upward mobility of his academic career? Did he take advantage of New York City's virtually endless sexual landscape, whether in the dark or in the light of day, or just a few students in the classically Greco-Roman crosshairs of Western pedagogy and pederasty? How kinky did the sex get for Maribel? Did he like toys, role play, domination, or submission? How about fisting? Did he put it on video or like to watch, even if others would not care to see it, or even if no one cared to hear any of the answers to any of these questions at all? Such a line of inquiry would be cast as inappropriate or even as obscene if it were directed at Manning Marable, the institutionalized scholar. Yet this questioning is not necessarily so when that same scholar directs his focus elsewhere at, say, certain Black subjects or at popular Black revolutionary icons, or in the case of Professor Marable, Malcolm X, El Haj Malik, El Shabazz, Omawale. I love it. Anyway, so I might have taken that question or comment out of context, but that's how I like to answer that. I think Thomas I think he lays it out as it should be laid out. Let me see. Anything else? Yeah, I mean, you know. Yeah, no, Spike Lee's politics are, you know, we talked about him, he's pushing the crypto stuff too, by the way. Anyway, I don't see it's the chat is doing its thing as usual. But anyway, so I guess we could wrap there. It's all good. I really appreciate you all coming through, and those who will hear this later. I think, you know, I appreciate you all coming through as well. Definitely check out all the rest that is goings on. Oh no. Oh man, damn. I had not heard that. Damn. Sorry to hear that, man. It's I did hear from someone who works within the Black counseling psychological world that there has apparently been a tremendous uptick of, among other things, suicide among Black youth in the recent years. So I'm very sorry to hear that. Oh, most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah, I definitely would check that out and check out Kaba's show later on today as well. There's some good stuff with A. Peter Bailey, also with us at imixwhatilike.org. Of course, he was a contributor to our Alive Reinvention collection. Yeah. So definitely feel free to check all that out as well. And, all the links that I have in the show notes as well to add some context or some whatever, or to just check to see if I've interpreted things correctly is also always welcomed as well. Anyway, like I said, I appreciate you all coming through. We will be back. Well, I won't be there, but the remix crew will be back tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. I'll be back up in those Morgan State classroom streets. Anyway, take care, good people. Big shout out to all of you for coming through this morning. For those who will see and hear this later, I appreciate you as well. Definitely like, share, join, subscribe, all those good things. Check out the new Discord, link in the show notes. Check out HBCU Project, imixwhatilike.org as well. And like Fred Hampton used to say, to you, we say peace, if you're willing to fight for it. So peace, everybody. Catch you next time here at I Mix What I Like. Thanks.
I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. What I like, what I like.